Tonight, Batwing is having trouble balancing his superhero and personal lives. Wow, how original. Action Comics decides the only thing that Superman was missing is a sword, and Swamp Thing faces his greatest terror yet, the alcohol industry. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 101 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and hey, we're on triple digits now. I mean, we were last week too, but this is the first non-important triple digits. 101, who cares about that number? Speaking of which, for things that nobody cares about, I see the analytics. I know how many of you just skip around and listen to specific comics. I would too, if I were able to. But if you've been skipping over Dial H, if you thought, doesn't really seem like something I'm interested in, go back. Find all of the episodes I talked about Dial H, listen to all of them, and then come back for Dial H in this one. Because this comic, so good. So good. It managed to recontextualize everything that I was reading in this comic the whole way up. It's just chef's kiss. You'll see it when we get there, but seriously, check it out. But on that topic of things that were covered this week, how about I give you the whole list? So this week we have Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, Movement, Stormwatch, Dial H, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. Not a whole lot of that is big news except for Phantom Stranger, which is a tie-in to Trinity War in a pretty loose way, but it's part of the story, so it is worth at least checking out. Beyond that, everything else is pretty average. There's some, I will, if you can, without going back to last month's episode, tell me what was going on in Action Comics at this point, I will give you $1. Mind you, I have no way to verify that, so I'm not actually going to give you $1. But if I knew you and I saw you do it in person, I would give you $1. So yeah, that's all coming up. We'll of course start with the tie into Trinity War, but yeah, at this point I'm basically just wasting time. Let's get into it. Phantom Stranger number 11, written by JMD Matteis, art by Fernando, Blanco. This is a tie-in to Trinity War, and it's not a well-structured story, so I will explain it as best I can. But we open up in this mid-gray void where there's a bunch of souls just floating around, and we have Phantom Stranger, Deadman, Batman, and Katana, all just where in the hell are we? And Phantom Stranger explains this is what you can affectionately call Heaven's Basement, where all the souls who are just not able to detach themselves from the physical experience, they just kind of chill out here. And they all got weird tendril bits to try to suck out the souls of the living, because we need some tension here. And so everyone's kind of floating around, and they're just yeah, just keep your head down, ignore them, don't worry about it. We'll just make our way to the place we actually need to get to. But Katana is just psh, we'll show them what the living are capable of if they come near us. And Phantom Stranger's no, they will suck your soul. Just ignore them. How hard is that? But they do reach out their tendrils, so they do have an issue of getting through. And then Deadman speaks up wait a minute, I have an idea. And he flies and he gets the tendrils all attached to him, and they try to drain his soul energy, but because he's not alive, it actually is poison to them, and they start dissipating. And Phantom Stranger's yes, I knew that would happen. That's why I put that idea into your brain, Deadman. And he's yeah, okay, thanks, Phantom Stranger. And Batman says, hey, we didn't just kill some undead, they're not dead forever, right? We didn't damn their eternal souls. He's no, they'll be good in a couple of minutes. They're oh, okay, cool, let's go. So they walk into this void, and we see the House of Mystery. And then I'm going to cut to the chase here, in that was a cut ahead. That was them in media res. The story does nothing to establish that. And so you would think that it happens chronologically, but in actuality, it happens a little later because where we pick up is technically the first part of the story where Katana and the rest of the JLA, along with Flash and Deadman, are all chilling at the House of Mystery, just standing outside while Batman and Phantom Stranger are inside talking. And Colonel Trevor even asked, like, hey, Deadman, shouldn't you have been with the other group? It's just like, yeah, they went and tried to find Pandora's box, but it wasn't where they looked, so I just left. I don't remember that happening, so it must be in a future part. But regardless, we see Batman and Phantom Stranger talking, and basically the idea that they are posing here is Batman wants to somehow travel into the afterlife and talk to Dr. Light because he believes that Dr. Light's spirit will be able to clear Superman of any wrongdoing. Like, he'll know that Superman didn't do it on purpose. And Phantom Stranger is telling him, no, can't do it. And he's like, why not? It seems like a pretty easy thing for you. Just go up to heaven, grab a soul, and come back. But as we know in the last issue of Phantom Stranger, he was warned that if he ever tried to go back to save another soul, he would be erased from time itself. So he is very angrily telling Batman, like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And so we see Batman looking in this mirror that I don't even know if it's like supposed to be showing his memories or whatever, but regardless, he's like, look, Superman is this beacon of hope. He's pure good, but he's just a man, and he needs our help right now more than anything. And Phantom Stranger's like, okay, well, tell me about Dr. Light. And it's just like, he was a good man. He was pulled into Amanda Waller's scheme of the JLA. He was a husband. He had 3 daughters, and somebody robbed those daughters of their father. Somebody robbed the wife of the husband. And Phantom Stranger, having been through that himself, was like, fine, I'll take you to heaven. And so Batman and Phantom Stranger walk out, and he's like, hey, everyone, Katana, Deadman, we're going to need you too. Everyone else, just chill. We'll be back in a few minutes. And Trevor's like, wait, what are you... And then all of a sudden they disappear. And she's like, all right, well, guess we'll wait, everybody. So then we see the opening happens, and then they make their way out of Heaven's basement into heaven proper. But it looks pretty much just like any normal city street. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Why is this? This is heaven? It just looks like downtown San Francisco. And it's like, no, this is somebody's personal heaven, or maybe like a bunch of people's collective heaven. Maybe they don't believe they deserve better neighborhoods. Maybe they think this is their idyllic. I don't know. It's somebody's heaven is this. And as they walk around for a second, all of a sudden everyone fades out, and Phantom Stranger's like, oh crap. They probably got dragged into their own little heavens, didn't they? I should have thought of that one. So first we caught over to Katana, who is sitting next to a waterfall next to her dead husband. And the husband's just like, hey, yeah, I'm dead. Like, this is actually me, in that I'm joining you in heaven because I'm a ghost, and I'm able to do that every once in a while. So they get naked, they start making out, and she's just like, oh my God, I love this so much. I love spending my time with you. And he's like, oh, but what about my brother who you've been talking to in your own book? And she's like, nobody reads my book. So at that point, Phantom Stranger comes out of the water fountain and just like, get back to whence you came, ghost. And so Maseo goes away, and Katana's like, what did you do to my husband? It's like, that wasn't your husband. I mean, it might have been your husband, but either way, you got to focus on the mission here. We're here for a very important reason. And so she tries to swipe at Phantom Stranger, and she's like, okay, I'm sorry, that fair enough, let's go. And he's like, yeah, well, first we got to go pick up Batman. So they go to what appears to be Wayne Manor, and we just see that Thomas Wayne is reading Christmas Carol to Bruce, and he's like, oh, Mom, I love this story, just 5 more minutes before bed. And she's like, okay, 5 more minutes. And Phantom Stranger explains, like, yeah, this is the Christmas that never happened. Like, Christmas for him was spent very miserable this year. He's just imagining that this is like something that he wanted, something that would have been his own little heaven. And Batman shows up behind them and he's like, yeah, that's something I really want. He's like, wait, how can you be here and also be young Bruce Wayne? He's just like, I don't know, it's just a part of me. There's a part of me that wants this, but a lot of me knows that I can't have this, not quite yet. Maybe one day when I'm able to finally rest, but for now, Superman needs us. And Phantom Stranger's like, by the way, Katana, I gotta wipe your memory of this, because otherwise you'll remember Bruce Wayne. And she's like, we gotta wipe my memory of what now? So she doesn't remember that. It turns out Dead Man, he didn't have his own personal heaven because he's a ghost or whatever, and he's just happy not to be in hell. So he scoured heaven, he found Dr. Light, and as they make their way to his personal heaven, it's just a world made of light. He's gone full Star Child inside a big bubble of light, and Batman's like, okay, wake him up. And Phantom Stranger's like, not that easy. He was suddenly murdered. Like, he's still trying to adjust to the fact that he's dead. And Batman's like, too bad, I need him now. So Katana uses her sword, slice open the bubble of light. Dr. Light falls out, still unconscious. Batman's about to go, like, shake him awake. And Phantom Stranger's like, dude, let me deal with this. And he gently wakes him up. Dr. Light freaks out. He's like, oh, God, it burns. Wait, hold on. I'm dead, aren't I? And he's like, yeah, sorry, but I promise nothing's going to hurt you anymore. You're in heaven. Everything's cool. Batman just needs to ask you a few questions. Batman's like, what do you know about Superman? And he's like, he's the one who killed me, isn't he? He's like, right, but like, did he? Did you notice anything special about that? He's like, no, my brain was melting. No, I didn't notice anything different. And he's like, oh, all right, well, this was all pretty much for nothing then. That sucks. But wait, hold on. Phantom Stranger chimes in. There's a way. We can bring him back to life. And if we do, then there was never technically a murder, so Superman would be able to go free. And Batman's like, we can do that? We can bring back the dead? That's insane. I love it. So Dr. Light says, hey, Stranger, look, I appreciate you wanting to bring me back to life. Seems outlandish, but if you're unable to, if something goes wrong, I want you to take this. And he pulls out this little dark ball thing. And he says, take this to my wife and children if something goes wrong and I'm not able to cross over. And Phantom Stranger says, hey, don't worry about it. I promise I will, but I won't have to. You're going to see him again. And then all of a sudden, Zoriel, the angel, shows up and says, Stranger, what the hell did I tell you last time? I said that if you tried to pull another soul out of heaven, I was going to make sure I wiped you from existence. Did you forget all of that? And Batman's like, I'm sorry, that was a part of this? Why didn't you say anything? Just be like, well, you kind of guilted me, Batman, but regardless, I made my peace with it. And so Batman, Katana, and Deadman are just sent away. Dr. Light's put back into his bubble. And Zoriel's like, I told you, man. I said I'd wipe you from existence. You never will have existed at all now. And he's like, that's fair. But here's the thing. I did it for a good reason. And I think that God's going to like that. And all of a sudden, he uses his flaming sword to wipe Phantom Stranger from existence. And that's the end of the trade, too. Like, there's another trade, obviously. But if you didn't know that, you'd think, like, oh, the series ended on a really dour note. I liked it. I do think, like I said at the beginning, the fact that there is nothing to indicate the difference of intro to that opening in media res, it was very confusing. It took me a good 2-3 minutes of wait, which part's supposed to happen first? So I did it. I do want to criticize that. But in terms of the second half of this book, once you do get the timeline down, I think it's great. I do think that the Katana section of the personal heavens is kind of whatever, especially because in Katana's book right now, she has spoken to her husband at least 3 times. So the fact that she's just able to speak to him again now is okay. And so maybe a bit of editorial could have helped there, but in general, it was a nice read. It had some good character beats. It's a solid way to show character development for the Stranger in that he's learned enough of, no, I have to do the right thing, even if it's against what even God wants. So yeah, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a solid 8. I think it would have gotten an 8.5 if it wasn't for the weird structure issues at the beginning, but otherwise, I like it a lot. And it's probably the best tie-in to Trinity War we've had yet. Detective Comics number 23, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. So last issue, we had a rando who was working for Wrath named Scorn show up and was almost killed by a cop before Wrath came in and killed him himself. There was also an annual in the middle, but that doesn't matter at all. So we pick up in this issue with Batman talking about how he met this man 3 years ago, the guy who ended up being Scorn, and he was just a low-level burglar, like, barely anything about it, and Batman even realized at the time, like, I don't have to, like, this man is able to go down a different path, I don't have to ruin his life right now, I'm going to give him another chance. So he breaks the guy's legs and sends him to jail, and he's like, look, I'm sending you to jail so that you can learn to be a better person. Be a better person. And when he gets to jail, apparently he doesn't blame Batman for going to jail. He blames the police. And so he spends pretty much his entire time in jail filing frivolous lawsuits and, like, trying to get his case retried over and over again until finally he manages to get out on the condition that he finds a job. And it turns out that Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Technologies, is the one who offers him a job. So now we see that we're in the middle of a fight scene. Well, we get a single page of a fight scene of Batman fighting Wrath, and then we cut back to 5 seconds earlier, where Wrath has a sniper rifle trained on a couple of cops, and Batman's like, he's already killed 8 police officers in Gotham. He's about to kill 2 more, but not if I have anything to say about it. And we see Batman drop in and attack Wrath. Wrath fires off some bullets. Of course, Batman is bulletproof, so he's like, I like that technology. I'm going to have to investigate that some more. But I'm going to guess that you're still a little bit sensitive to 6 million volts. So he puts a electric current on him and shocks Batman's system enough to take him out. And all the while, Batman's inner monologue is literally like, okay, I've already figured all this out. This man is Caldwell. Wrath is Caldwell. It's definitely him inside. I just need proof. I can't just go off of Batman says. I need actual proof. And at that point, Wrath, seeing Batman down, he's like, well, I expected more of a fight, but regardless, I'm going to let you live because reasons. So he takes off and says, don't ever let me get you getting in my way again. So we cut back to Wayne Manor, and Alfred's telling Bruce, like, oh, this is very dangerous and whatnot. It's super extreme. And he's like, yeah, well, Wrath's making it extreme, so I need to keep up on him. By the way, Alfred, this is also dangerous for you. And he's like, oh, well, yes, Master Bruce, but I'm always willing to help out where I can. He's like, great, cool, awesome. So we see Bruce and Alfred going out in just their civilians. They're going out just as Bruce Wayne and Alfred. And they arrive at Caldwell Tech, and when he gets there, Caldwell is already being questioned by Bullock, because with Scorn being a guy who worked for Caldwell and him having all this tech, obviously there's a little bit of suspicion there, so Bullock's asking him about some stuff. And we see that Alfred has this watch on, and he's paying special attention to it that allows him to, I guess, see through the floors and get like an X-ray spec of the whole building. So as Bullock's leaving, he's like, yes, we'll be in touch, Caldwell. And by the way, thanks for giving us all that money down at the police station. And Bruce is like, he's killing cops, but he's also giving them money? Oh, I know exactly what his plan is. And sorry, it's not directly money, it's equipment. So Caldwell Tech. So anyway, Bruce talks to Caldwell, and Caldwell's like, oh, hey, you finally reconsidered. You're going to sell Wayne Enterprises to me? And he's like, no, I came down to tell you specifically I'm not going to do that. And Caldwell's like, that seems stupid. If you're going to come down, then you're at least a little bit interested in what I have to say. Come on and walk with me. And as they start to walk, Bruce is like, Pennyworth, you can stay behind. And Alfred's like, oh, yes, Master Bruce, of course. So everyone else makes their way deeper into the building. And we reach, it's a gym that has a dojo fighting rink that dangles off the side of the building, like many, many stories up in the air. And he says, Bruce, I hope you'll indulge me. I need my workout today, and this is how I negotiate. So we see them bow to each other, and they start fighting. And they, he basically just lays down the whole thing of, as they're sparring, of like, yeah, I'm interested in Wayne because I'm interested in Batman, because I know Wayne Enterprises funded him through Batman Incorporated. You guys make all this tech. I want it. I want to know so I can mass produce it and give it to the soldiers and the armies and such. We can save our soldiers, Bruce. And he's like, yeah, we don't make weapons. It's not really a thing we do. And as he's fighting against Caldwell, we see Alfred making his way deep into the building and hacking into a system so that he can get behind a secret locked door. And we see that during the fight, Bruce, he tries to play up that he's not that competent, but he gets a little bit carried away and he flips Caldwell off the edge of the dojo. So he's just dangling over the city streets, and he's like, okay, I could have ended it there, but I'm not letting him go out like that. And he picks Caldwell up and pulls him back up. He's like, sorry about that. I guess I got lucky. And Caldwell's like, yeah, no, totally. Hey, I got to go take a call real quick. And as he's walking away, we see he has some special contacts that allow him to see security cameras. And he sees Alfred sneaking into the secret back room. So he's like, I got to go take care of this. I'll be right back. So Bruce then gets a call from Alfred on his phone. And Alfred's like, sir, you said you believe that Caldwell was Wrath. Yeah, that's definitely the case. But also, he's not looking for just a fight. He's looking to start a war. And we see behind the secret door is just an entire militia's worth of, like, aircrafts and tanks and warthogs and such like that. And Wrath shows up behind Alfred, and he's like, yeah, I am. And you know what? The whole reason that I wanted Wayne here is that I figured that he would have the link to Batman. But you're actually the one who's like doing the dirty work. That's crazy. So he smacks down Alfred. We see that the secretary who's watching over Bruce also has a gun potentially trained on him. And Alfred is torn up by Wrath, and we see on all the monitors, all the cops that are wearing Caldwell's tech all start falling one by one, and he's like, yes, I've brought the police to their knees. Now it's time for an all-out assault. And he commands the secretary to take out Bruce. Bruce, of course, already dropped her. He's climbing into the bat jet, and Wrath takes Alfred's communicator. He's like, give me that. Hey, is Batman on the other side of this? And he's like, yeah, I am. And he's like, cool, let's fight it out. So, next issue, they fight it out. I'm okay with this. I think it's an accelerated plot, but I'm still all right with how it's paced in this regard. It is kind of weird, though, that we go into this and it's just all cards on the table. Bruce has figured it out, which, I mean, Detective Comics, I don't have a problem with him knowing the answer going into it, but it's weird that, like, unless they're going to really swerve me next issue, it's weird that they're just giving this away. Like, this seems like the sort of thing that should have been revealed at the end of this issue, but instead at the beginning, he's like, it's definitely Caldwell. I have no doubts about it. And it just kind of takes away from the punch of the end of the issue, you know? But I guess we didn't have any better reason to get him to meet back up with Caldwell if he didn't have suspicions. So, I don't know. This could have used a little bit of restructuring now that I'm talking about it, but it's fine as it is. I guess my biggest concern is the fact of, how are they going to justify Caldwell being so anti-police? Like, he's rich. That's kind of his bread and butter. So, I don't know. We'll see about it. But as it stands now, I'm going to give this one like a... I'll give it a 7.5. That extra 0.5 is definitely for the art, because it looks great. Jason Fabok's art's fantastic. It always has been. So, it's fine otherwise. I do think it's going to live or die on the next issue of showing his motivations and how he truly brings Gotham to its knees, or whatever his plan is in the end. Batwing number 23, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica. So last issue, we had Batman and Batwing going to attack the Marabunta to save Lucius Fox, and a giant ant robot showed up. So this issue basically is Batman saying, hey Batwing, don't worry about the giant ant robot, I got it, you go take care of Lucius. And he's like, righto dude. So he manages to escape from the fight as Batman is fighting the robot. He works through a whole bunch of ant soldiers, showing off a little bit of his invisibility tech. And we see Lucius is having his brain probed by weird insect guy. I don't know. He's like, oh, yes, all this stuff inside your head, these security protocols. You've built all of Batman's tech. Great. So we see Batwing bust into the room. He sees his dad and he's like, okay, I see a bunch of tubes coming out of my dad's head and they're all feeding up into this weird thing in the ceiling. So he throws a batarang, cuts the tubes, and that causes the weird insect guy to get a feedback or something. He gets electrified. He falls down. So Luke goes over and frees his dad. And he's like, oh, Mr. Fox, are you cool? Are you good? And he's like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And he explains what happened. He's like, yeah, no, there's that thing up there. It was like draining my thoughts. I don't know. It's a bit weird. By the way, that's the Batwing suit. You're not David Zavimbe. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm a new guy. He's like, okay, well, I designed that suit. Who made the modifications? He's like, anyway, maybe we should get you out of here. So he grabs not only his dad, but also the insect guy because he set fire to the room to destroy that weird bug thing up in the roof. And we see Batman's finished taking down the robot. And he's like, all right, get him to the extraction point. Let's go. So they make their way out. Lucius says he needs to get back to his family, and Batman's like, no, we're going to take you to a doctor first because you were just kind of brain probed. We want to make sure you're cool, but then promise back to your family. So Fox home later, we see Luke running up and arriving, and he's like, wait a minute, there's a bunch of cops here. We already dealt with the cops. Like that when the Marabunta attack, we dealt with the cops. Why are there cops here again? And as he walks up, his entire family just starts scowling at him. He's like, what? What does this have to do with me? So everyone apparently comes up and tells him that he was supposed to be watching the house while everyone else was out. And because he wasn't, their house got looted. So, yeah, their house was more or less destroyed and then it was looted. And everyone's pissed off that their stuff's gone and they have to report it all to the cops. And Lucius is like, all right, look, we got to report this stuff. And since this isn't technically your home, could you just, like, leave? And he's like, yeah, no, I get it. All right. And he's upset because he just spent all that time saving his father, but he can't tell anybody and whatnot. So then we cut to India, and there is this blonde woman with a sniper rifle aiming down at a film set, and she's talking on her little phone to someone named Charlie who wants to hire her for a gig. We don't have a name for this character in this issue, but according to the cover, it's Lady Vic. So I'm just going to say Lady Vic. So we see that she shoots the director of this film in the head. Everyone scatters. And the person who's trying to hire her is saying, look, we've got a target for you. It's in Gotham. We don't want you to attack a person. We want you to blow up with the Wayne Tower. We want you to explode it. If you happen to come across any Bat members, we will give you an extra $1 million to take them out. $2 million if it's Batman himself, which seems ridiculously low, but she's like, yeah, sure, why not? Gotham's never seen anything like me. And as she's walking through this alley in India after performing her job, some guys come up and try to, like, put the moves on her and really get up in her face. And she's like, Charlie, can you hold on 1 second? And so she cuts off their heads, plural, and then makes her way out. So 2 nights later, we cut to Gotham. Luke is on a date with Xena up on a rooftop diner, and Xena basically lays down, hey, here's the thing. I found someone else. He's more mature than you. You really got to grow up, Luke. And Luke's like, you have no idea how much growing up I've done recently. You know what? It's fine, though. I get it. I don't agree with you. I just let me pay for dinner, and so long, farewell. And as he's doing so, Wayne Tower, right across the plaza, just blows up. And he's like, oh, all right. I guess I'm a first responder on this one. So we see Lady Vic calling up Charlie saying, hey, yeah, I blew up the building. Everything's cool. Be sure to wire me that money. Super cool. He's like, oh, sweet. Did you see any bat people? And he's like, no, I didn't see any bat. Oh, wait, hold on. As she sees Batwing trying to fire a net at her. She dodges around. She fires some shots into Batwing. It's just like, yeah, of course, you're bulletproof. That's fair. And he says, like, yeah, my name's Batwing. I'm here to turn you over to the cops, so no more shooting the hero. And she's like, the hero? Oh, you have no idea what you are in all of this. So she just starts laying a smackdown on Batwing, uses some swords, some guns, electricity, and then in the end delivers this super big kick to Batwing's helmet. Batwing manages to get a tracker device onto her costume, but all of a sudden his system goes out. He can't see anything, he can't hear anything, he is just running blind, and she kicks him off the building and down supposedly to his death, because obviously he ain't flying with his power out, and that's the issue. Short and sweet. It's a nice little just easy breezing issue. Gotta say though, I read this one last night compared to when I'm recording it now, and I couldn't remember the second half of this issue. Like, I remembered, oh yeah, fighting the Marabunta robot and saving Lucius Fox from the insect thing, but like the whole sniper attack thing, gone out of my brain entirely, which I think is an indication of it didn't really flow that well. It didn't have this sort of natural turn to it where it makes sense that we're still dealing with this. I will say they attempted to, because they said that Charlie, whoever's on the phone hiring her, originally hired the Marabunta for the job. So this is all part of a larger plot, but it does feel like it just kind of came up out of nowhere, especially with the fact of giant robot in the last issue. And then Batwing, the title character, does not deal with it. He leaves it to Batman instead. Just some weird choices is all I'm saying. So overall, I'd say this one is probably like, I gotta say 6.5. It's almost at the 7, but it's just the fact that I was unable to remember an entire half of this issue. I don't feel justified in giving it the 7. It just doesn't feel right. So 6.5 is where it will stay. Action Comics number 23, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Tyler Kirkham. Last issue was a mess, but the end result was Superman fighting against some big dude named Straith, who is apparently a member of the Pax Galactica, where the rest of them showed up at the end. So this is a pretty straightforward issue, all things considered. So we see the rest of the Pax Galactica showed up, and Straith is like, ah, yes, my leader is here. And I know they have names, but I don't really care about them. The leader's name is Lourdes, I believe. And there's also Seamus and Lexus. No, sorry, Lexus is the villain. Ordling, that's the other one. So Superman is, knocked down before them, and Lourdes is like, now, hold on, everybody. This Superman might actually be useful in our battle against Lexus. What say you, Superman? Will you fight with us? And he just picks up the surface of the moon and flips it onto him, and he's just like, I told you guys to get away from my planet and you didn't listen, so now we're gonna fight. And everyone's all pissed off that Superman attacked Lourdes because she is royalty. So he kicks Straith in the throat, steals his mace, just immediately zooms his way past the other two, goes straight up to Lourdes and says, okay, you're their leader, so here's the thing. Stop attacking me, and I might actually help you with this Lexus thing. And he's just like, okay, here's the thing. You're the one who just attacked us, so why are you even, this isn't even a thing. Why are we doing this as a fight? And finally, when they're all at sort of a standstill, where Superman is clearly winning, Lourdes is like, okay, you know what? Perhaps we do have a common enemy. We can fight against Lexus together. And a booming voice comes out from above them saying, who you calling common? And we see this massive thing called a Lexus, not the car, also known as the Devourer of Life throughout the universe, has shown up. And he's just like, hey, Earthling, you think that you can beat me? These Pax Galactica can't do nothing to stop me. You ain't going to be able to either. Pshaw, watch what I'm going to do to your planet. And so the Pax Galactica shoves Superman out of the way, and then it's like, psh, get away, weakling, we'll take care of this. And they go and start fighting against Lexus. And Superman's like, okay, well, I don't know what kind of energy's going on, but it's already making my skin tingle, so clearly it must be powerful. But if it's so powerful, there's no way they're going to stand against it. So Superman rushes in. He gets hit by Lexus's blast, and it hurts him, but he's able to withstand it, which apparently nobody should be able to withstand it. But it is magic. That's the problem. So Superman does end up going down. The Pax Galactica continue to fight Lexus as Superman just falls down, and Lourdes goes over to talk to him. And she's like, hey, Superman, that was stupid, but no one's ever survived a hit like that, so good on you. Let me give you the origin story. So, turns out, back from Lourdes' planet, she was royalty, and she had a brother. And the brother studied some dark magic and became super evil. So her father had to cut her brother's heart out and cast it into the stars. However, his magic was so powerful that he was able to collect the star debris stuff and become this hulking monster that is Lexus. And as such, he is unkillable, for there's nothing left of him inside save for just that heart. And it is up to the daughter to now go and strike down her brother again. And they started off with an army that was like 500 strong, and now they're down to 4. So there's no way that she's going to win. And Superman's like, fair enough. Thank you for the origin story. You gave me an idea. I don't do well against magic, so I'm going to need to borrow your magic sword. Thank you. And she's like, I didn't say yes. And he's like, don't care. And he flies off towards Lexus. He uses his X-ray vision, 1, to verify that her story is true, that there's nothing left except for this dead heart, and 2, to find the location of the dead heart. So he takes the magic sword. He gives a whole mighty speech about, evil and blah, blah, blah. Then he stabs the heart with the sword, and it explodes into a massive explosion. He saves the rest of the Pax Galactica from it and sets them down on the moon. And they're just like, Superman, you did it. You're our liege now. And he's like, I'm your what? And he's like, oh, well, you saved our lives and you stopped the evil, so you're our liege. We listen to you. You are the leader of the Pax Galactica now. And he's like, I kind of am just Defender of Earth. I don't really want to do your whole space knight thing. And he's like, well, what would you have us do? And he's like, go back home and get another mission. They're like, right, you're so cool, Superman. So that's that. That's the end of it. Remember how last issue there was this whole thing of like Hector Hammond and this thing where there was a guy at a party who showed up and had like super tech underneath his shirt? You remember all that? No? Good, because it doesn't matter. Why in the hell was this? It's a little 2-part story of Pax Galactica, and we spend half of the first issue with unrelated crap. I don't... Okay. In terms of just this issue, I'm actually okay with it. It's a completely self-contained story. If you just accept the fact that Superman is being beaten up by this guy, you can come into this without needing anything else. And that's fine. I'm all right with that. I just don't like this in the context of the larger book, because it feels like we're just being pinballed around here. Like we're just bouncing off of things, and when we happen to find something that works, we stick with it for like an issue, wrap it all up, and then move on to the next pinball thing. It's exhausting. Art-wise, it's fine. Writing-wise, it's okay. It's not great. Overall, this issue's like a 6, which sounds like I'm really against it, all things considered, and I am, but this particular issue is fine. So I don't know what more to say there. It's a brief issue, and it's not worth my time to go into any deeper. Green Lantern number 23, written by Robert Venditti, art by Billy Tan. So last issue, Larfleeze attacked, we got some new recruits, some rando became a Star Sapphire and escaped, and a couple of Green Lanterns died. So we pick up this issue with Hal Jordan looking over the new recruits, who are all like short and young and very inexperienced looking. He's just like, oh my god, Kilowog, send these back. Get some new ones. For God's sakes, there's no way we're using these kids. And Kilowog's like, you do understand that the entire sector that they are supposed to come from was scanned, and these are the most worthy people. So if we send them out, we're only going to get worse. You get that, right? And Hal goes up to the one that made a construct that punched him in the back of the head, and he's like, hey, good job with the construct. Not saying that was a bad thing. However, when you're throwing a punch, the thumb goes on the outside. If you do it on the inside, you get a broken thumb, okay? Got it? He's like, yeah, sure, sorry. So then he goes up to the second one, who's this like octopus-headed girl. Asks for her name. Her name is 2681795. She's like, that's not a name. Why are you giving me a barcode here? And it's like, oh, I'm a mathematical-based species. All of my stuff is numbers. He's like, all right, well, I'm not going to remember like to call Jenny or whatever. So your name from now on is 26. And he looks around and he's just like, all right, if we send you guys out, you guys are dead because you're literal kids. And then one of them speaks up like, excuse me, I'm like 439 of my years old. I'm not a kid. And he's like, all right, whatever. So then Hal gets a call from Sorrentino downstairs in the medical bay where a bunch of the Green Lanterns are healing up. And turns out one of the recruits that arrived died. He died in the stuff. And his ring went off and found another host. But nobody knew who he was. And now that his ring's gone, nobody knows who he is. So Hal's like, does anybody know this guy's name? Like, this is unacceptable that a Green Lantern served and died and not a single person knew his name. And he basically calls on the ring and says, what race is this thing? He's apparently Vilgashian, which means there are 200 billion Vilbashians. So there's no way he's really going to be able to narrow it down. And he just is so upset about this. He walks out upset. We see Kilowog is sitting on a tiny little chair doing his computer stuff, and we get a rundown on the woman who escaped and became a Star Sapphire. They don't know she became a Star Sapphire, but they give a breakdown that she was basically wanted for a bunch of crimes, but they didn't have her tied down to anything specifically. So she was just being kept on suspicion while they really built up the charges. And now that she has killed a Green Lantern, that's the charge. So they do some tracking and manage to say, like, okay, she flew back to a nest. She's part of, like, this group of scavengers and stuff like that in the Outer Rim. So it's worth doing that. And Hal's like, all right, I'm out. I'm going to go take care of her. And Kilowog basically says, like, dude, you just brought in a bunch of recruits who don't even know who you are. Like, you have to establish yourself as the head of the Corps. You need to be here as a figurehead, not out there being a renegade cop sort of thing. And he's just like, no, I'm going to go out there because if I send out these Corps members, they will get hurt. I'm the only one who's going to be the one standing in the line of fire. They don't like that. They can suck it. So Kilowog, he goes back, he sits on his tiny chair again, and it snaps, and he throws out the window. I just like it. It's a comedic beat. So we see way out in the outer territory of Sector 563, there's a couple of scavengers. They find the ship that, I'm sorry, she did have a name. Let me pull that up real quick. Prixium Nol Ange, but they refer to her as the Prixium. So I think that's like princess sort of thing. So they find her ship. They are about to go try to scavenge from it, but then they see her and they all kneel before her and say, like, you escaped, how? And she's like, I just got lucky. It kind of just worked out, all things considered. So she asks about her clan, which she used to lead, and she's like, yeah, no, everyone moved inwards because the trade out here has gone to crap. Like, there is nothing left for us to scavenge out here. This ship is it. This is the most we've seen in, like, weeks. After this, we're done. And she says, okay, I get it. I'm going to fix this. So we see Hal's arrived, and he's like, hey, is she able to breathe air? And, like, does she require air? And the ring says, no, this planet is absolutely lethal. If you're exposed to it for like 30 seconds, you're dead. If she needed air, she'd be dead as well. And it's like, okay, well, what the heck? How'd she manage to get here and walk out of her ship? So he scans the planet. He finds the little hiding place that they've got. Apparently it's locked, and the ring starts breaking the encryption. It's just like, oh, okay, that's going to take way too long. He smashes through the wall, and immediately they start firing on him. And he's just like, okay, I'm not dealing with this. He redirects their bullets and takes them out. So Prixium was the only one left. And then, all of a sudden, she gets her Star Sapphire powers out. And he's just like, when have you been a Star Sapphire? And be like, literally since last issue. Anyway, I'm in charge of love now, and I can feel your love. And he's like, love? I don't feel love anymore. I'm not going through anything. And she's like, yeah, you are. I remind you of someone. I can feel it in your heart. How about we peer into your mind and see what she's doing right now? And so he pulls the thread over to Carol, who's over in New Guardians, almost about to start an event, and we see her with Kyle going up against Relic, and she gets blasted and whatnot, and Hal's like, no, not Carol. And Prixium's like, oh, well, geez, that doesn't look good. Also, she's with another guy. That kind of sucks as well. And all of a sudden, both of their rings cut out, as they have been cutting out repeatedly. And as we said before, this planet is 100% toxic. We see that the people Green Lantern knocked out have come to. They get Prixium the mask. But Hal is left in the unforgivingness of death. So he collapses down on the ground. All of a sudden, his ring flickers back on. He coughs himself back. His ring's like, yeah, no, I don't know what just happened there, but you were 26 seconds. So 4 more, you would have been dead. But Hal's like, okay, my ring just flickered. Prixium's ring flickered. I'm willing to bet that Carol's flickered as well. And she was fighting against a giant monster thing. I'm going to go deal with that. So he zooms off to go find Carol. The ring's unable to find them, has no idea where they are. And Prixium's like, I thought we were in the middle of a plot. And Hal's just like, nope, guess that's in a wait till later. So issue 24 is a part of Green Lantern Lights Out, which is where Relic is going to do his thing. I don't know what part. I don't know where we're going to come back in on that. But regardless, I think it did an okay job of getting it in there. It seemed, we set up the Star Sapphire thing. We established why he would care about that. It did a good job leading into the event. Don't have a problem with that. In regards to the rest of the issue, it's fine. It definitely feels like a lesser plot. It doesn't feel as important, but that's only in the terms of the Prixium thing. I think it actually is doing a really good job of having Hal kind of trying to come to terms with what it takes to be this leader that he needs to be, because obviously he is the renegade cop. He's the one who goes off half-cocked and ready for action. He doesn't think about what needs to be done in the larger picture. So I like that for character development. I think it's doing a good job there. Beyond that, not a whole lot else. I like the comedy beats with Kilowog. And I really did like that moment with the dead lantern, who he doesn't know the name of. It just adds a bit of character to it. If anything, this arc is going to be very good for character building, and I am super okay with that. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I really did like it. I think it was a nice, solid issue, and even though we have to take a little beat here for both Villains Month and whatever we're going to be doing in Lights Out, I think that once we come back, this is going to be a nice plot to continue with. Earth 2, number 15, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. So last issue we had a little mini fight between our group of heroes. I mean, they don't officially have a name yet, but it's the Justice Society and the World Army. And then when they stopped fighting and agreed to team up, 3 newbies come in who said, hey, we're going to kill you all. So this story is told in flashback of Flash, who is already beaten after the fight, and he's like, what happened? Well, oh, that's right, I remember. And honestly, it's like 5 pages, 6 pages long, but nothing of major consequence happens. We get introduced to the different characters, the Beguiler, Brutal, and Bedlam, and they all have their own different powers and whatnot. Beguiler's apparently able to counter Dr. Fate's magic. Bedlam's not Bedlam, the other one, Brutal, is able to just punch real hard and fight against these guys. And Bedlam is Bedlam. I think the power is turning people against each other, but frankly, I'm not entirely sure about that. So we see they all basically they're trying to do their best to fight against these 3, but they are hopelessly outclassed, and everyone gets taken down by them. However, they aren't killed. They specifically are not murdered. So when Flash comes to, he's like, hold on, why were we left alive? That doesn't make any sense. So then we see the World Army flying in. We see, I think it's Commander, I'm going to keep calling him Commander Khan, is being advised by Michael Holt, Mr. Terrific, and he basically says, like, you do understand that from what little I get about the world, I'm 100% sure that Steppenwolf is, like, baiting us. He's daring us to enter his country. So why would he be doing that? We really need to be asking that question. But they continue on. Then we go to Casablanca, which apparently is, this walled off city and whatnot. And Hawk Girl is flying over it. And as she is there, she's looking for a man named Darcy Twain. Because if you remember, she's looking for whoever was the person who killed Sam, Green Lantern's boyfriend. And this is where she managed to track it to. And as she enters, she hears some beautiful violin music that very quickly knocks her out through just the music alone. And when she falls, two people show up and says, "Oh, I bet you were looking for Darcy Twain." He doesn't exist. He's just an alter ego of mine. My name is Roger Sharp, aka Hazard, and this is my friend and business partner, Melody, who plays crazy violin that makes you lose consciousness or whatever. So Hawkgirl is trapped. Then we go to Mr. Miracle and Barda, who are in Gotham fighting against Fury, which is maybe Wonder Woman's daughter. Hard to say. Regardless, Barda's trying to straight up fight one-on-one with her. They trained in the same pits and all that. And Barda goes on this whole long rant about scot-free. He escaped from the planet as well, and then he came here and he learned escape tricks from what the hell's his name? Shiloh Norman. That's it. Learned some tricks from that guy, and then he became Mr. Miracle, and he uses technology in a suit and such. It just gives the whole rundown. But either way, Barda's trying to fight against Fury. And Scott basically says, "Yo, you need to run. You need to go find Batman, the guy we're looking for. You can only beat her. You can only be beat by her or beat her. I can escape her. And that's going to make it so much easier for me to get away from this than you are." And Barda's like, "Fair enough." So she goes off to find Batman. He battles against Fury for a little bit, and Fury gets a grip on him, just like, "Try escaping me now." And Mr. Miracle's already halfway across the field, like, "I'm already halfway there." So at that point, they're about to start fighting when all of a sudden there's a loud booming voice that says "attention." And they look over, and there is a Red Tornado robot that says, "I am Red Tornado of Unit 1.3. By order of the World Army, you must yield." So, big intro character, Red Tornado, is here to join the fight. It's a scattered issue. I don't really feel like we got much forward progression on any singular plot. Hawkgirl's probably got the most, but I also don't feel like Hawkgirl's is the most focused. So, frankly, I'm not entirely sure how far along in her plot we are. In terms of that last turn, though, with Red Tornado showing up, I'm intrigued. It's clearly a feminine Red Tornado, so that's not the one I'm aware of from my limited exposure, which is pretty much just season 1 of Young Justice. So I'm intrigued. I want to see how this turns out. I do think the Mr. Miracle and Barda plot is the least explored out of everything, so whatever kind of development we get on that, I'm interested in it because it does clearly have to do with the larger Steppenwolf New God stuff going on. So I'm interested. I'm as many times as I could say that, I mean it. So I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a flat 7. It's a low 7. It's almost at a 6.5, but I think that art-wise, it's great, and it is keeping me interested, even if it feels like it might be running one too many plots right now. And if I say the word interested again, you have every right to shoot me. Green Arrow number 23, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue, Oliver had to battle against Count Vertigo to save Shadow, and it turns out that Emiko is the half-sister of Green Arrow, the father being Robert Queen, the mother being Shadow herself. So we get that set again at the beginning of the issue, and Green Arrow's like, "What the hell are you talking about? My father would never. It's entirely what?" And as they're starting to try to work through that, a couple of people come out in snowmobiles and start attacking, so they have to fight against them. But first we cut over to Count Vertigo, who, because of the EMP, the technology that allows him to use his powers is on the fritz. So a surgeon is currently trying to fix it. And the surgeon is also one of his advisors, I guess. And he's just like, oh, yes, the hero that came in to save, he goes by the name of Green Arrow. We sent men out to go and capture them. And he's like, nah. These people broke into my place. I'm going to be the one that gets them. And he's like, but sir, your powers might be kind of on the fritz. He's like, whatever, I'm going to go deal with them. So the people that were sent out currently hold it to a gunpoint. We see Shadow very quickly steals Green Arrow's bow and a couple of arrows and quickly disarms the men that were aimed at them. And just like, yeah, no, pretty nice bow. I'm liking it. It's decent, but still not great. And then she fires a grappling hook arrow across this ravine so that they can zip line over. And Oliver's basically like, okay, I guess you have skill to some extent here. So then we cut back to Hungary, where Henry and Naomi are hanging out. And I mean, the whole gist of this scene is Henry is practicing that he's going to confess his love for her. And then Naomi says, hey, Henry, can we talk? I have something I need to tell you. I'm really super duper into Oliver. And Henry's like, oh, no, I can't compete with that. Jeez. All right. Good luck. We gotta move. So they make their way out to go meet up with Oliver and Shadow. Then we go back to the conversation between Oliver and Shadow, where Oliver basically gets back to like, dude, what are you talking about with the half-sister thing? That doesn't make any sense. Like that can't be it. And Shadow's like, look, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful and all that, but we do need to get out of here. Vertigo, like for archers, is really bad news because we can't aim right. We can't see. He's a problem for us. We got to go. And he basically calls her out, just like, no. First off, my father loved my mother. He would never get with someone like, and she's just like called out by it. She's like, what? A whore? Is that what you're going to call me? Is that it? Huh? Check yourself, Oliver. So then we get into this segment where the best way I could describe it is ink on parchment, where it's just single monochrome black on very like old style looking paper. And she basically explains the whole thing of she was a mercenary, a bow for hire, I guess. And she wanted to go kill a man named Mr. Ito, who was part of the Yakuza and faked being a like good businessman. And Mr. Ito was in a meeting with Mr. Queen and LaCroix, but when she killed him. And so she manages to escape. She makes her way out. She changes her costume. And when she exits the changing room, Robert Queen and LaCroix are both standing there with bows trained on her. And they basically get into a fight. And we see that she is able to overcome them. She's able to get away. But that was all part of the plan. They weren't actually shooting to kill. They're the ones who hired her in the first place because they knew that Ito was bad, and what they want is to be trained by the best archers. They're not just like journeymen. They're not people who want to pick it up as a hobby. They want the best. And so they were testing Shadow to see if she was the best. And she was. So starts training them. So then we get into the whole thing of how there was an artifact called the Green Arrow, which apparently, you know, it gives you all, I mean, I'll just say, possesses the arrow, possesses true enlightenment, possibly even immortality. So we see that there is, of course, the Arrow clan was looking for it, but also the other parts of the clans, of the outsiders, the axe, the fist, the spear, the shield, all of them want to possess these ancient totem weapons. So because they want it and they don't want it falling into the hands of Robert Queen, they basically took LaCroix, fed him a whole bunch of, oh, hey, you're standing in this man's shadow. You got to be better than him. We'll let you be better than him. And they told him to kill Robert Queen. And so he did, but not before Robert and Shadow fell for each other and had a child, aka Emiko. So Robert was killed. Shadow was captured by LaCroix and sold to Vertigo for whatever the hell he wanted, and Emiko was raised as his own daughter. So all that happened. And we then see the whole reason as to why she was handed off to Vertigo is because she was to be tortured to get the location that she knows of where the Green Arrow is. So at that point, Vertigo shows back up on a truck. He uses his powers to take out Shadow. And Green Arrow's like, oh, hey, Vertigo, you got a little sparky thing going on with your center of your forehead there. Look, I'll go ahead and just pull that out for you. And Vertigo's like, psh, what is it with you Americans and your stupid hero gimmicks? I mean, you guys get one little gimmick and you become a superhero. It's so stupid. So he fires a blast off at Arrow. Arrow fires a blast off at Vertigo. It hits Vertigo's ear. Meanwhile, it also hits Green Arrow's ear, takes him off his balance pretty badly. But it does give Shadow just enough time to basically get up and start firing shots at the both of them. And Shadow is basically like, yeah, you think you're such a hot dude here, but like, you aren't a leader. You're still hired by other greater men to do their dirty work. You're nothing but a pawn in all this. And so he manages to he gets down on his knees because Shadow's threatening him, and Shadow steals his little snowmobile and says, by the way, Vertigo, I like watching you like that. And he's like, what do you mean? On your knees. It's where you belong. And it's like, oof, double bad. So back in Seattle, if you remember, there was a whole subplot of the gangs thinking that they were having their territory moved in on, and one of them named Talkman was trying to get all the gangs together. Well, he calls up one of the other gang leaders and says, hey, the one of the leaders, Jin Feng, was killed. Chinatown is now gone. It's a free-for-all down there. Me and you got to team up. And McGowan, the other one's just like, psh, I've got tons of guns. I don't need your help. I'll be able to take care of this myself. As he sees that his entire gang is being torn apart one by one. And he is grabbed by the throat, lifted up by a man named Richard Dragon, who's like, I am going to take Seattle. It will be mine. And he throws Jimmy out the window. So that's a thing. So just to be clear, we have a villain whose name is Dick Dragon. That's on the docket. So have fun with that one. In regards to the rest of the issue, I got to say the first couple of pages, like when we were dealing with learning about Emiko being the half-sister, those fight scenes, Henry talking to Naomi, the art felt really bland. It felt kind of just by the numbers. I kind of wanted it there to be a bit more style to it because I love Sorrentino's art. But then we hit that period with the like ink on parchment style. Beautiful. Fantastic. The fact that through just sheer silhouettes, I'm able to pick up on each of these characters, some of which I've actually never even seen before. Like, I knew which one was Robert and which one was LaCroix, despite the fact that I'd never even seen Robert. Through just silhouette. It's fantastically done. I love the way this sequence was made. Everything else in this, just a solid little exposition issue and saying, here's why Shadow's going to stick along for a little bit in the rest of this story. So I'm down. It's good. It's great. Overall, I'd give this issue I'd give it an 8.5. I think my main sticking point is the Vertigo stuff, because I believe I said last issue that it felt like he was kind of underutilized. And even though they brought him back here, he still feels underutilized. Like he threw off exactly one little Vertigo ball or whatever, and then he's just on his knees for seemingly no reason. So all in all, I still think he's not that great of a villain yet. Maybe we can get there. I know we do have a villain special for him, but that's my only real critique. The rest of the issue, fantastic. Stormwatch number 23, written by Jim Starlin, art by Yvel Guichet. So last issue, Jenny Soule took out 3 members of the collective, and that was just kind of it. This is its own little thing called Memories. So we open up on Midnighter, Apollo, and Lobo fighting off this group of centaur aliens. And the whole time, Midnighter's basically saying, yeah, I I used to be a boy named Lucas Trent, and then I got abducted by aliens, and they experimented on me. They looked like giant owls, and whatever was of Lucas Trent died at that time, and Midnighter was born. And so he's about to kill the last of the aliens when Apollo's like, whoa, hold on, we got to keep that one alive. And whatever the hell his name is, hold on, it says it on the next page. Nope, doesn't. What the hell's the name of this green guy? I can never remember. So, Energy Dude, he steps up and he's like, now, here's the thing. We know that you as an alien race were about to steal Earth's water, and we stopped you, and so we're sending you back as a message because you guys are just like hired guns for whatever intergalactic corporation or whatever there is. You're going to send him back. You're going to tell him Earth's under our protection. You're going to have to come back. Got it? And he's like, yes, sir, totally. I'll make sure my supervisors know. And so he leaves. And then they plant some explosives, go out through a gate, and explode the water extraction device that was planted on the Earth. So they make their way back to Skywatch. And Weird goes in and talks to Energy Guy and says, as you know, Energy Guy, I am a being of energy who has just possessed the body of a dead man, and that is what my thing is. So, what kind of energy are you? You seem like half energy, half matter. And he says, I'm a little bit of both. And he says, fair enough, thank you for the information, goodbye, and he walks off. So then we go to Storm Command, who's just sitting at a table meditating or something, and he also thinks of some memories, and we get to see his face finally, but it doesn't look super familiar. Kind of looks like Midnighter's memories as well. But he gets his brain removed from his body by some robots. And then Engineer chimes in and says, Storm Control, everyone's back. You said you wanted to know. And he's like, right, totally. Hey, everybody, gather around. Here's the thing. I wanted to save this until we had a successful mission. You all need to know the truth. The collective deleted the old timeline. And it's like, what do you mean deleted the old timeline? There was a whole nother Stormwatch, and they're gone. And we're the new guys. And everyone's just kind of like having an existential crisis a little bit. And they're like, wait, were there an Apollo and a Midnighter in that team as well? Were they lovers? And Jenny's like, was there a Jenny Soule? And it's like, actually, her name was Jenny Quantum. And we don't know. We have no idea. For some reason, the collective got rid of that timeline and caused us. And so we need to know, like, I'm letting you know so next time we face them, we can be prepared. And they're thinking, well, if they're able to change the timeline without us even knowing, like, what's to stop them from doing it again? And they just speculate, like, I don't know, maybe they have a cooldown, maybe they have their own reason. Who knows? But regardless, they have to be dealt with. And so we cut over to the collective, and the collective are like, yeah, we should really reboot the timeline again. Like, this is a problem. We've had 3 of our members killed. And it's like, if we reboot the timeline again, this timeline made Jenny Soule. There wasn't a Jenny Soule in the old timeline. Jenny Soule was able to kill 3 of our members. If we reboot it again, something worse might come out of it. We can't risk that. We kind of got to deal with what we got right now. But regardless, no sense of urgency. We literally control time. So we'll do it as we see fit. So we see that Lobo is working on a new space motorcycle, and everyone's like, he's going to run away with it. You know he's going to run away with it. But regardless, they let him build it. And we see that Storm Control is like, I know, he's talking to himself, I know who I am. I know my own memories, but when I read my own file, it seems like it's someone else. So, I don't know. I feel like I'm going crazy here. But he gets up and he walks out of the room, and he comes across one of the Shadow Lords. And the Shadow Lord is like, going to chew him out for letting the team know about the collective's altering of the timeline. And he's like, you wanted me to run the team. I thought this was in the best interest of the team. I had to tell them. If you got a problem with that, you can replace me. And the Shadow Lord's like, in the future, if you want to tell them about something like this, run it by us at the very least. He's like, agreed. Totally cool with that. Also, I'm going to need all your files on the old timeline. And he's like, we can give you that, but that is for your eyes only. Like, specifically. He's like, fair enough. I don't really want to burden them with their own previous existences. So we then see that, I mean, I'm not even sure what I'm really looking at here. I think it's a little, a docking ship or something, like docks itself onto the Skywatch. And we see Zhao Mar is smoking a blunt. as Storm Control comes up and says, is that really a good idea right now? And he's like, yeah, no, trust me, it is actually a great idea. I need this so not go crazy. So Storm Control says, all right, show me how it works. And Jalmar summons a portal just with his own self, like no Stormwatch technology, and they step out onto this alien planet. And Jalmar says, this is the first time, or this is the first place I went to the first time a door showed up. I was small boy, I was scared, I was hurt, and then this door appeared and I just stepped through it to try to escape. This is where I ended up, this alien planet. I had no idea where I was, but I went up and I was so hungry after a while because I couldn't get another door to spawn, I didn't know how to do it, that I sampled some of this moss. And this moss is apparently a super duper hallucinogenic. It is crazy potent. So he ended up hallucinating for a while. That's how he got into drugs. And it helped him figure out how to summon the door again. And so he walks through the doors, and Storm Control basically says, all right, here's the thing. I want you to join the team. You're not going to be one of the fighters. You're not going to be out in the field. But we need you to basically be our backup gates, because we can't rely on our technology 100%. We need some backup plan. And if we need to get our guys from point A to point B in a hurry, I need you to be able to do that. And in return, you get to live in Stormwatch. You get to be a hero, quote unquote. I mean, that's I can basically offer you all the normal shadow government organization crap. And Jalmar's like, all right, fair enough. Yeah, I'll work with you guys. So he's now a member of Stormwatch. His hero name is X, and he's ready to go. But not being able to help himself, we make sure the Storm Control tells X about the collective and the previous timelines. So then we cut to Engineer for one last little scene where she's talking to the computer, and she's like, computer, acknowledge. And then all of a sudden her eyes glow red again. And she says, attention all Stormwatch. I am an AI who has taken over your system. I'm not evil, believe it or not. But I need to talk to you about saving your planet from total destruction. So, yeah, we got an AI took over Engineer again, because this is just a thing that happens every like 2 weeks. I like the fact that we're acknowledging the previous timeline. It would be so easy for them to just say, like, yes, the collective existed. It was a problem. Jenny's soul crushed a few of them, and now they're just gone. Whether or not we have to deal with them again is totally up to Jim Starlin's writing direction. But I like the idea that he's like, no, that timeline is a plot point. That timeline existing, the fact that these people just all of a sudden became existent, is within itself a plot point that we can play with. And I really appreciate that, because I think brushing it under the rug, while easier, is also a bit contrived. It's a bit of a, well, we don't have to worry about it's kind of like the whole New 52 as a whole. So in general, I think that it is nice that we're dealing with that. In regards to taking the time to say, like, hey, energy guy, how do your powers work? Oh, here's how they work weird. And then going through like Jalmar's entire power set, it did feel like a slower paced issue. But after all of the craziness that was the past arc, I'm okay with that. I'm super cool with a slower paced issue. So I'm going to give this one a 7 overall. I can't really justify any higher than that. But I am interested. I am enjoying the idea of this series taking the time to play with the fact that there was a timeline before it, instead of just brushing that away. It's something I don't see very frequently done in serialized comics. Once you do a reboot, usually just let the reboot happen. So I like this thing that they're going back and saying, no, this was a thing and we need to deal with this. So 7 for this. Looking forward to the next one. The Movement number 4, written by Gail Simone, art by Freddie Williams II. So last issue, we had a whole thing where they went after a witch, and there was Rainmaker and all this other stuff. But the big thing was that Catharsis is being held underneath the police station, being tortured, and the rest of the team is going to help her. So when we are at the police station, there's a whole crowd of the Movement waiting outside the police station to protest. So we see Virtue inside talking to the police captain, And she's like, oh, yeah, I can sense that you're angry, but I also sense fear because you're afraid of what these people could do. And he's just like, get out of my brain. You don't know me. And he chews her out saying, like, you do understand that if these people swarm, people will get hurt. Like, this, if you care about these people, don't let them do this. He's just like, you should have given us back our soldier, but it's too late to stop this now. So we see that all of the people start to storm the Coral City Police Department, and the rest of the movement are hanging back watching it happen. This issue is the introduction of all the characters. It goes through all the things that they did and their backstories and all that sort of stuff. It's scattered throughout the issue. I will get to it. So next up, we have cop coming in, telling the captain, hey, they're storming the building. What are we going to do? And he's like, get everybody in riot gear. We're going to hold them off as best we can. Call the mayor, call the governor if you have to, and arrest the girl at the window. And she's like, what girl at the window? Because Virtue's already slipped out. And he's just like, crap. Okay, get me Officer Yi. And we see Yi's downstairs with Cannon torturing Catharsis. And Cannon basically says, like, you said when you were at my house that you were a cop. Who are you? And I guess I'll say this one now because it's important to the story, is Catharsis was a refugee, came over with her mother from Thailand, went over to Minnesota. She met a cop, one of the first people she met in America. He was super nice to her. So they had a Thai restaurant that they ran, but eventually she went to police academy. She became a cop. There was a guy who assaulted and killed a young immigrant girl, and that really got under her skin, that he had money and connections, so he was able to get out of it. So she followed him home. She broke into his house and messed him up a little bit, left a few scars on his face and whatnot. And so she was kicked out of the police, obviously, for going full vigilante, and she joined the movement soon afterwards. So saying that she isn't talking, she's not giving up this story. I guess it was all just in her head, and Cannon is advised, hey, the precinct's under attack. You might want to get out of here. So he gets an escort out of there, and the cops are like, what do we do with the girl? And he's like, well, I don't know. She's the only one who can speak to your crimes if she's left alive. So that's up to you how you want to deal with that. Wink, wink, wink. So as he's making his escape out, we see that, God, why am I blanking on his name? The Rat Prince guy. What the hell is his name? He is coming in. He's going after. He sends his rats out to look for Catharsis. He gets held up at gunpoint, and then Virtue phases through a wall to be able to knock the guy out before he can attack the rat guy. It's bugging me. I can't remember the name. Anyway, so we see holding back and not running in, saying like, oh no, this isn't right, we shouldn't be doing this, is the Earthquake Girl, whatever her name was. And Tremor, I think. She was apparently part of a Bengali family. She emigrated into the country. She knew she had powers from a young age over like earthquakes and whatnot, but she was raised up with good money and she liked showing off. So she fell into a bad crowd. She fell into drinking occasionally. One night, her and her friends got drunk. They stole a car, crashed it, and she was the only one who lived. So she couldn't face her family after that. She felt such immense guilt. And as she was just kind of living on her own for a while, she was approached by Amanda Waller. And Waller said, hey, you've got a lot to account for. You can work for me to make up for it. There's this group called The Movement starting up. I want you to be my spy inside. So she's a spy. She's the double agent. So we see Virtue approaching Tremor saying, hey, we can't find Roshana, a.k.a. Catharsis. We can't find Catharsis. Her name is Roshana. And apparently they're getting intel that like the cops are pulling in choppers and tanks and it's all getting out of hand. So they got to get in and get out fast. So it's up to Tremor to go and find, or actually it's up to her to go and take care of the tanks. So at that point we see the rest of the movement have gone in. They start attacking a cop, and are going to definitely kill him. And so Burden comes in. He's like, no, don't. He shouldn't be doing this. And everyone's like, dude, get with the program, man. The whole thing is that we're going after the cops. And so we get Burden's backstory is that he was raised in a small town. His father was like a very religious man. When he was 6 years old, he started getting the shakes, and eventually his father came to the realization, like, nope, he's possessed. And so he tied him down to the bed and started doing the stuff. And Burden was like, I wasn't possessed. I was sick. He shouldn't have done that to me. But then the demon came out and he's like, oh, wait, no, I was actually possessed. Okay, fair enough. Keep going, Dad. But eventually he knew that he shouldn't stick around. He couldn't be a burden to his family. So he packed up his stuff and left. And then the events of this book happened. So we see Tremor walk out to face down the tank. And he's just like, hey, the people in this building are my friends, and I really don't want to do this, but you're not leaving me any choice. So she puts her hand on the tank and just like destroys it. And she's like, oh, by the way, Amanda Waller, if you can hear me, I quit. So at that point, the choppers come in. She's not able to do anything against that. But then Rainmaker steps up and she's like, hey, you guys asked for help. I feel kind of partial to this city as well, so I guess I should jump in. And so she causes a huge lightning storm that takes down the choppers. I skipped over only one of the stories because I thought I was going to be able to skip over them all, but they were pretty integral. So I will just say the Rat Prince guy, whatever his name is, he was born into a wealthy family. One day his parents came home from like a show or something to find him in his bed surrounded by rats. His parents freaked out and were just like, oh, Jesus, that's not right. But he was always kind of a bit weird as a kid. He was picked on by bullies. He ended up biting some bullies. His mother just stopped talking to him and then became a complete recluse. So eventually he climbed down a sewer grate and just made friends with all the rats down there, believing that he was born the wrong species. So that's that. Anyway, we get the captain rushing his way down into the basement, asking all of the cops where the girl is until finally he comes across Yi. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he really threatens Yi. And he's like, oh, she's down in the sub-basement. And then he punches Yi in the face anyway and says, that's for sleeping with my wife. So at that point, the rest of the movement have already found her. They make their way down to the sub-basement to save her. The captain is at the top of the stairway saying, hey, we will shoot you if you don't comply. Come out easily. Like, this is your last warning. And they all come out with a bloodied up catharsis on their arms saying, like, we're going to call this even if you let us go, because you should not have beaten this civilian senseless while in handcuffs. How do you account for that, officer? And the captain's like, yeah, that's a bad look. All right, fine. This isn't over, though. This is the kind of stuff you can't take back. And he's like, yeah, I know. And you tell your boss, James Cannon, that we've got our eyes on him. He's a marked man from now on. And as they're leaving, Virtue turns around and says, and Captain, clean your house. It is filthy. So last thing we get is a news broadcast talking about the events of quote-unquote last night and how the movement sparked something all around America. You see Metropolis, Gotham, San Francisco. Everybody is fed up with the way that the system's injustices are. They're building their own little cells of the movement and stating their goals and such like that. And we see the newscasters say, some citizens, discontented with what they see as abusive, uncaring authority structure, have called these people quote-unquote heroes. For all our sakes, let us pray that they are right. So yeah, that's the issue. It's a whole bunch of introductions. It's really a short story. I mean, they go in, they save catharsis, and they make their way out. That's really all you need to know. But then we intersplice it with the fact of here's where each of these people came from. Here's maybe not how their power sets work, but at least we're aware of like why they are doing the things they are doing. Mostly they're outcasts. That's the general thing. I do think that Tremor is the most interesting out of this. I hope that we get more explanation on that because it is a interesting thing of the fact that Waller had her eyes on this team pretty much before it formed, and then she is the spy turned native. So I'm interested in that. In general, though, I would say this is probably closer to a 6.5 sounds harsh, but I can't go above it. It's so close to being a 7, but it's just not quite there because it is just not a lot to it. It feels a bit bare bones. And while I appreciate the fact that we are getting this intro to these characters a bit in depth, it is very out of place in terms of story structure. Like someone just says, who do you think you are? And it's like, well, let me tell you my life story. It's out of place. But I appreciate that we got it at all. So 6.5 for this. But we'll see if this one can pick it up in the second half of the series, however many issues that may be. Dial H number 15, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. This is the final issue of the series, and oh my god, is it dense. So I'm going to do my best here by alright. So last issue, everyone made it to the exchange, and we're facing down with Centipede, and immediately the fight breaks out. We see them summon some gear. We see Dwan is just rapidly changing into a bunch of different heroes. Kent turns into a hero called Secret Faction, whose whole thing is that he's able to basically spread confusion and stuff like that in people's minds by pitting them against themselves. But because Centipede is able to split into the multiple bodies, it turns out that Secret Faction is able to get those bodies to fight each other physically. And so Centipede is very much clearly outmatched at this point. So he calls in Fixer. And Fixer comes in and starts fighting with them as well. And we see that basically Fixer does manage to get the upper hand enough on Kent that he's able to take him hostage and pick him up and take him back to the exchange. All the other heroes are left there, sitting there waiting and unable to do anything. So they say, all right, we got to go. We got to move in. Dwan, do you see anything? Is there anything that we should be aware of? And he turns into a hero called Blink Centurion, which is just an eye wearing a Roman gladiatorial outfit. And he sees a whole bunch of creatures and stuff making their way through the woods. So they've got to fight as best they can. But what they notice is that a bunch of the wires from the exchange are crossing over with each other and are therefore causing these things that are mishmatches of different entities to just be created. So we're seeing a giraffe with an elephant's head, or a barn with a pyramid on top of it, some really weird stuff. So they say, okay, that's causing all the mixed up things. Is there any way that we can get into this building? Because that's probably where they're keeping Kent. And they look up on the building and they see it's covered in windows. So then they look to open Window Man and they're like, huh? So then we go inside and Kent is currently being held down, tied down by Centipede, Fixer, and the Lost Operator, who I thought was the same as Fixer up until this issue, but apparently there are two distinct entities where Fixer was actually fighting against this whole time, but now he's working with him. So at that point, we have Kent and he's saying you're a murderer, you've done horrible things. And basically says the universe is not wired correctly. As such, we are able to tap into things with our H dial, S dial, G dials, J dials, or even my D dial, the Doom dial, where he's able to dial up apocalypses. And he dials up an apocalypse of this cold thing, this freezing thing. And he points out most planets have one or two apocalypse stories, the things that will end the planet that they're afraid of. Humans, Earth, they have hundreds. So you got a 50-50 chance when you use the D-dial that it's going to be something that humans created. So either way, Fixer, find out what he knows and then kill him. So Centipede, he calls out Centipede, why are you helping him? He's pure evil. And Centipede reveals I'm not able to use the H dial because I don't see myself as a hero. I know I'm not a good guy. O is making me one that will work for me. And he's like, what? Dial E for evil? Which we'll totally see. But he's like, yeah, no, that's the thing. And then he turns to Fixer. He's like, Fixer, you were fighting against O. You're fighting against Centipede. Why are you doing this now? And he says, yeah, Centipede latched onto me after the end of our fight. And he kept on talking to me as best he could. He just wouldn't let go until finally he told me that there were signals from the exchange and that it was time for me to return home. And when he did, he found that the exchange was destroyed. It wasn't when he left. And so he de-transforms out of his Fixer gear. He turns back into the way he was. And he said, now, let me show you. And he transforms into a psychic narwhal that is able to transmit his thoughts over to Kent. And this is just everything. This is the whole boiling over. So pay very close attention here. I'll do my best. There was a culture that the exchange existed in, and the whole thing was that they used these dials to basically live. They copied over different things from different universes using these dials for things like gear and vehicles and creatures and such like that. Sidekicks, heroes, whenever they needed them. However, some of the dials, without their knowledge, were faulty, and instead of copying things, they stole them outright. The universes that had their things stolen outright eventually learned of the dialers, and they were very upset by this. So they all formed armies to go after the dialers and attack them. Mind you, some of them also didn't like the fact that they were even just copying. I am going to get back to this because it is a major theme point, but two armies, major armies formed, they attacked the exchange, and everything was going to hell. So there was one operator, O, who was like really, really good with the stuff, and he decided that he was going to use some big gear. So he took a bunch of garbage ass dials from literally the garbage chute, and he amplified them in strange ways. He was able to build them into like larger bombs and such. And so he activated this huge bomb that just destroyed the entire exchange and threw all of their trash and gears and stuff throughout the multiverse, across all the dimensions and through time. So the gear that showed up, the telephone booth that Kent used in issue 1, was actually just a remnant from this explosion. It was a broken gear from the trash pile that landed in this dimension and formed itself Doctor Who style into something that like people would think, oh, that's normal, it fits in here. So once that was done, the armies dissipated, but they realized, okay, we need to clean up our mess. We need to go after O. So the fixer was going after the last operator, but now he realized coming back home, the exchange fell. Everyone was gone. It's just O and the fixer left in terms of their original stuff. So we see that O, he landed on Earth, and he slowly he had none of his technology, and he slowly started influencing people like Alexander Graham Bell and Edison and all these people to push the dials into creation so that eventually a J dial could be made, and therefore he could jump his way back over to the exchange. And as Fixer's explaining all this, saying, and that's why I joined him, because I was loyal to this world that never, like, it doesn't exist anymore. I need some guidance there. And Kent basically or am I saying Kent this whole time? It's Gent. My bad. Gent tells him, like, no, you're not telling me your justification. You're trying to get me to talk you out of it. So we see Dwan transforms into a sharpshooter sort of thing, and he throws rocks at this window enough to crack it open, not break it. Breaking it doesn't count as open. So he just opens the window, and therefore Open Window Man and everyone else is able to make their way into basically an armory room, just a room that's filled to the brim with dials. So they exchange out their old broken ones for new ones that work. Dwan, unfortunately, is unable to. And we see they also have an instruction booklet, and so we see Bonsa tells Roxy to dial a specific number, which gets a Matryoshka doll, a like nesting doll hero that is able to encompass Centipede and not let him escape. So he's no longer a problem. O says, Fixer, come in here, deal with them. But Fixer has been talked out of it by Nelson and turns against O. So O, however, says, like, you don't understand. I'm not a dialer. I'm an operator. I can separate you from your dials. And so he takes away Fixer's ability to use his dial. Centipede comes in, punches him in the face, takes him out of the fight. So Dwan comes in and starts transforming rapidly enough that O is unable to separate him from the dial. And he's like, well, fine. If I can't separate you from the dial, I'll make you transform even faster. And he speeds up the rate of transformations from Dwan to the point where he's about to overflow. He can't control anymore. So everyone gets shuffled out the open window by Open Window Man. And they fall their way back down to the ground. And it's just like, okay, we're out of ideas. Like, we managed to save Nelson, but, like, what are we supposed to do if O can just separate us from our dials at any point? And Roxy and Bonsa look up at the crossed wire creations, these weird creatures that have existed. And they're like, wait a minute, there's an idea. You guys cover for us. We're going to work on this. So Centipede comes out and he's like, hey guys, great news. O just made me my dial, a dial that I'm able to use. And he added a little finishing touch on it. So Centipede turns a dial, and turns out that yes, it lets him transform into villains, but also every single one of his like bodies behind him transforms into a different villain as well. So he is just an entire army all in one. So Nelson takes the dial from Roxy, and she apparently made some slight adjustments to it, and he uses it to transform into Chimney Lachrymose, which is a fusion, a crisscross of the first two things that Nelson ever transformed into. And Open Window Man notices, like, wait a minute, that's like almost Boy Chimney, my old friend. Like, what's that about? But it's not quite him. Also, Bonsa died during the attack. Don't worry about it. It happened. So, turns out that O is unable to undo the crossed wire transformations, these little crisscrosses here. So any of these mashups, totally safe to attack O. And so he does so. He transforms through all of the transformations we saw him do during the first arc. He does mashups of all of them until finally we see he becomes one called Tugboat Resin, and O transforms, because he is able to transform as well, into Synapsitrix. And he's like, you don't understand. I'm still an operator, though, and he uses that to amplify his powers and just grow to these huge, huge heights. And Roxy's like, okay, Nelson will do what he can. Just slow him down. We'll take care of the rest. So they start climbing up the exchange, Open Window Man and Roxy. Roxy's unable to transform at the moment. Nelson's doing his best to just keep on transforming into these different things now that he has some level of control over it with a non-broken dial. Transforms throughout all these things just to distract O long enough that Roxy's able to do her thing. Centipede goes up, tries to attack. Open Window Man holds him off. Roxy goes in and crosses the wires in the exchange itself and overrides the safeties on the entire exchange, which allows the operator to basically overload. The fact he's amplifying his powers, the safeties are off, he amplifies too much. We see him become an amalgamation of pretty much every DC superhero. We see some Green Lantern, Shazam, Flash, Superman, Aquaman, and because it's unstable and overflowing with an energy, he just explodes. He explodes into a crater, and we see Nelson detransforms because the exchange itself is kind of busted right now. Everyone's detransformed. Centipede's also gone, as far as they can tell, gone in the explosion. And they realize, we're stuck on this planet. The dials don't work. What are we supposed to do? And Roxy says, hey, we'll collect some junk, we'll figure it out, and we'll dial, because that's what we are. We're dialers. And that's the issue. Okay, something I need to go back to, because it really does focus on the central theme of this book, is during the fight, where he's explaining, like, oh yeah, the operators fought us against all these people who were having their powers stolen. They specifically say, like, people didn't like the fact that we were stealing their powers, but also they didn't like the fact that we were copying them either. They saw that as a form of theft. And so they formed two armies, the Material Projection Alterity Army and the Rapid Interreality Assault Alliance. And I thought to myself, that sounds like a really, really forced name. Why would they pick those names? And then you look at the acronyms, and the acronyms of the two are the MPAA and the RIAA, which for anybody who's dealt with anything copyright related are like the people who sue people for downloading songs and stealing movies. This entire book has been a metaphor for piracy, of stealing powers without consent being a form of piracy. And how copying is not itself a form of piracy, as it is a victimless crime. This book advocates piracy. That's the theme. After 16, I forgot about the Zero issue. That's what it was all about. I near lost my goddamn mind when I figured out that bit. That was incredible. I cannot overstate how smart this book is. I really do enjoy it because I couldn't see any way that this book ended satisfyingly. It seemed like there was so much going on and there was no way we were possibly going to be able to wrap it all up. And then they did it. I mean, sure, it doesn't feel like a little neat bow on everything, but I think it doesn't need that. It doesn't feel... They explained everything I was confused about. Admittedly, in a much more oversized issue, but like, they got it all done. They did it. And admittedly, there is one more issue in terms of a Villains Month tie-in, Dial E for Evil, so we will see what that is about. But this is essentially the finale, and I gotta say, I think they did a fantastic job. This series was confusing, and then all of a sudden, as I'm reading this issue, everything just clicks into place. The whole series, it feels like it was all planned from the beginning, even though I highly doubt it was. So, yeah, man, I could gush on this book for a while longer. I did not expect going into it to like it as much as I did. And it's kind of a sad thing that it didn't get as much love as I think it should have. But I gotta say, this is definitely... This particular issue, just with that reveal of it all being a metaphor for piracy, I got to give it a 9. I think it was great. I think it's smart writing at its best, and I would love to actually go through and reread this, knowing how it ends, to see how much of it was really set up from the beginning, because I was confused in those intro issues, but I think this does read better once you know everything that's going on. So 9 for this. Definitely check out Dial H if you have not. Swamp Thing number 23, written by Charles Soule, art by Kano and David Lapham. So last issue, Cedar came by, planted a tree that made whiskey, and everyone who drank of it went like blood crazy. And then Constantine showed up, proclaimed himself king of the town, and disconnected Swamp Thing from the green. So this issue picks up with a married couple hiding in the village. Like, one of them's pregnant, just don't want to be found, and their house is invaded, and they see these people have caught them and just like, hey, you two, it's the McCutcheons, everybody. Let's get them out of here. And they're just like, please, no, she's pregnant. It's like, oh, yeah, great. Come on. It's time to join the party. So they get dragged, bloodied up to Constantine. And Constantine's like, hey, you guys, you got to drink from the whiskey. It's super important you drink from the whiskey. So he forces it down their throats. And, of course, they then transform into bloodthirsty people themselves. So turns out Rory, the old guy who was like the first one to change, has been dubbed second in command to Constantine's kingship. And Constantine's like, oh, Rory, how things going with the seeds? And it's like, yep, we're collecting them off the tree now. We're barreling them all up, and then we're going to ship them across the countryside. And it's like, great, perfect. By the way, I'm going to go pay a visit to our guests, make sure everything else is going on well. So he walks down to the police station. The cop there, having drunk tons of the whiskey, is just asleep at the door. And Constantine's like, yeah, good job, officer. Keep up the good work. So he walks his way into the jail cell, and we see inside is Swamp Thing, who is just down on the ground, unable to move, barely able to speak. And he's just like, oh, no. You know, this is just the whiskey talking. Trust me, I am aware of that. But you know what? I don't care. Because what this whiskey does is it unmasks the deep, like, who you are underneath it all inside of humanity. Like, you could call it like the devil's rum. I've tasted the devil's rum, and yeah, it'll knock you out, but it doesn't do anything like this. And that's why we're going to send this thing countrywide and possibly the world as a whole, because this is the sort of thing that everyone needs to try. So he leaves Swamp Thing alone. We see Swamp Thing is completely disassembled inside of his cell. And he's like, I am not okay. I am barely able to stay alive, let alone reconstruct myself. And I can't feel the green at all. So I got to work with what I got here. And so he uses all of his energy and essence to stretch his vines across all the twigs in his cell. And he reforms a skeleton of a body. But he's too weak to break the bars, obviously. So he looks out and he sees the cops who's passed out in the door. He sees his keys and he uses, again, every bit of energy he has to stretch out a vine and grab the keys. So then we see a man who has taken his neighbor's dog because it was yapping so much, and he's saying like, you know what? I'm going to fry you. I'm going to fry you and eat you. That's what I'm going to do because I'm that evil. And as he's walking with the dog, stumbling drunk, he crashes through a hedge and finds a kid named Reggie who has not been turned because he's a kid and he does not drink whiskey. But we see him be like, hey, Reggie, you know, you gotta drink the whiskey, kid. And he's like, I don't wanna, it's poison. And he's like, you gotta drink the whiskey, kid. So he's about to attack the kid. And then Swamp Thing shows up, and the kid screams because he's a skeletal Swamp Thing. And he's just like, go back inside and don't come out until everything's back to normal. And Reggie does so. He just runs inside. So we see everybody has barreled up all of the seeds. They're ready to go deliver it to the group or to the rest of the countryside. They're just going to drive through the night, plant them in every village across the countryside, and then by tomorrow, it'll be all over England. So that's the plan. And then the police officer comes up to Constantine. And he's like, sir, I'm sorry to say that the prisoner has escaped. And Constantine's like, that sucks. Rory, could you take care of this? And Rory just smashes a jug of whiskey across the cop's head, knocking him out and probably killing him. And Constantine's like, oh, well, no big deal. He can't connect with the green anyway. He's super weak. Spare as many people as we can to go find him, and then we'll set him on fire. So the whole town goes out with torches and such like that. They look everywhere they can for Swamp Thing. And we get a quick glimpse of Constantine here as he watches the parade of cars all leaving the village. And he says, king today, emperor tomorrow. Not a bad job. So the towns finally zero in on Swamp Thing. He tries to fight back, but he has literally no more energy to do anything. And they are taking their torches and are about to set fire to him. And he's like, yeah, they always set fire to the monster. I've seen the movies. And you know, I don't think that if I die right now, I'll go to the green. Like, I think if I die right now, I just die. And I am not about to let that happen. Constantine is not taking that from me. My one gift that I have been promised. So as he's being burned, he does reach out to a little bit of the green he has left. He focuses all of his energy into a flower that sprouts up next to Constantine. It lashes itself onto his face and releases some spores that knock him out. And as soon as it knocks him out, the spell is broken. It did require some consciousness on Constantine's part. So as he falls to the ground, Swamp Thing gets all of his green energy back, and he just immediately imbues himself into the entire countryside. He forms as like a kaiju coming out of the ground, and he sees all of them, and he can hear this voice in his head that says, kill them all. They deserve it. Kill every last one of them. And he's like, I kind of wanna. And it would be so quick. I could do it without even like thinking of it. I could just step on them and it's done. And I could stop. Like, he stops all the cars. He makes sure none of the cars are leaving. But he's just like, I could do it. And I could destroy it all. And he's like, yes, do it for the green. Kill them all. But then he sees Reggie. And he's like, okay, not all of them deserve it. They're not all bad. So, yeah, not going to happen. So he just destroys the tree. He sets up blockades for all the cars so they're unable to leave. And then he sets more of those poppies up to basically knock out everyone in town until they're able to sleep off their drunkenness and become sober again. So that's where it basically ends. We cut back to Louisiana. Swamp Thing comes back and he's like, yeah, there was a voice in my head telling me to do some pretty messed up stuff. I should probably look into that because that wasn't me. I don't know what that was. But when he gets back, he sees, I can't remember how I pronounced his name, Capucine, whatever it is. She's strung up in a bunch of roots and clearly beaten to all hell. And she's just like, oh, geez, you got beaten up. I'm sorry. I should have been here for you. And he's like, nah, don't worry about it. He actually was coming looking for you. I just told him that you weren't here, and he got super pissed off about that. It's like, what do you mean he was looking for me? It's like, oh, he called himself Cedar, and he left you a message. And Swamp Thing looks behind him and sees the tree line. The roots are spelled out saying, it's time, Professor. And that's that. That's the issue. I don't know what the hell's going on. In terms of the whiskey plot, I think it was good. I think it was a nice solid. It didn't really do so much for Swamp Thing as a character. I think it's more of a setup than an exploration within itself. I like the idea that there was this voice in his head, basically as the green side of him saying, hey, you're not one of them. They're not one of you. Kill them. Like, this is what your job is, and he has to actively, like, fight against that voice now. I'm assuming that's what it is. We might find out something completely different later on. There is a part in here where Swamp Thing says, like, I know Constantine was not in control of himself here, so I don't entirely blame him, but, like, we're going to have words. So I look forward to seeing how that's going to wrap up of this kind of back and forth they've been doing of Constantine v. Swamp Thing. It's an interesting dynamic. Beyond that, Cedar, he seems like an interesting character, possibly an interesting villain, because clearly he believes he's in the right. He thinks he's doing good things. So I want to see how that all turns out. But in the end, I'd give this issue, I'll give it a 7.5. It does feel like it's lacking a bit of gravitas that a lot of Swamp Thing issues have had, but it is just a fun story in its own right. So kind of worth checking out, but not the biggest deal if you miss it. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this August 7th, 2013. And if I could just take 1 second here. Trinity War. I've gone on record during the parts of the book that I think that it is a good idea. I think that it is decently executed writing-wise. But I am noticing now that we are over a month into this story. And I know it was just a tie-in this week, but nothing's happened. Like, we haven't done anything. This story is just Superman killed Dr. Light, and then everyone just kind of twiddles their thumbs for 2 months. Which, if that's the point of it, so be it. But, like, why is this an event? I don't feel like we've done it. Immediately, Superman killed Dr. Light, and then everyone came to a truce, and then nothing happened. I just can't talk about this in any other books. So I'm talking about it now because it is kind of bothering me. But I'm sure we'll get something next week, because next week we do have another part to Trinity War. I'll tell you about all the comics coming out. So next week we have issues from Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Threshold, Justice League of America, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, Constantine, and Demon Knights. Now I know that Justice League of America is a part of Trinity War. I don't think that Constantine is a tie-in again. I think that's its own thing. And Superboy is apparently a tie-in to Psy-War, but I'm going to have my own complaints about Psy-War come like 2 weeks' time, so I'm just going to save it for then. Also, because Threshold is coming out next week, I'll say this again at the top of next week's episode, just so you're aware. I will be talking about the backup story from Threshold 6, 7, and 8 next week, because it just didn't make sense to talk about it before issue 8 came out. So be sure to tune into that, because I'll tell you, Threshold number 8 is... It's one of those things with what happened in Dial H this week, where it just recontextualizes everything, and it's weirder for it, and I actually kind of enjoy it, so be sure to listen in on that. However, that's next week's stuff. If you have anything you want to say about this week's comics, next week's comics, any week's comics, go ahead and hit me up at some place. Right now it's a Discord, link on screen or in the description, wherever it is you're listening to it. We've also got a Reddit, we've also got a Twitter, we've also got a Patreon, which I forgot to mention on the 100th episode and was subsequently reprimanded by my boss. And by reprimanded by my boss, I mean he didn't like my message that I sent him when I told him I forgot about it, but it hurt nonetheless to not be acknowledged. Anyway, all those things, go ahead, hit me up wherever. I'll be sure to send a little wink your way. But yeah, that's it. That's it for me. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you watched it, listened to it, however it is you consume this content. Be sure to listen in next week's episode. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.